Hey everyone, Ted Wyman here from the Winnipeg Sun with Scott Billeck, and we're here to discuss the 2020 NHL Draft and how the Winnipeg Jets did. Just wrapped up here Wednesday. The Jets took 4 picks in total. A big day on Tuesday night when they got center Cole Perfetti, a guy that they really like and think is going to be a big part of their future. Things may be a little less defined when you're looking at the 2nd, 5th, and 6th rounds, but the Jets get 3 more players there. Scott, just a quick thought on the overall performance of General Manager Kevin Cheveldayoff and his crew of scouts today.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to look back on Tuesday night and see Cole Perfetti and be happy that the team addressed their inadequacies, I guess, in the farm when it comes to centers and highly touted center prospects at this point. So I think that was that'll be the day that kind of defines this draft in terms of what happens with Perfetti, whether he comes and ends up in a couple of years taking over that 2C role on the team or not. The rest of them, it depends. I mean, the 5th and 6th rounds picks, you might not see them in the NHL ever. That's just kind of how that works. It could be minor leaguers. They could just not make it. Daniel Torgersson, I hope I'm not butchering his name completely. He's a guy, though, that you would be looking at as, potentially another Swede, left wing, a guy that could eventually make, carve out a role. He's just a 2nd round pick. It's not like he's, up in that 5th, 6th, 7th round area. Would talk to him today. Still doesn't know the English language that well just yet.
Not to be expected either, given that he's lived in Sweden his whole life. But.
Exactly. But he's put up good numbers in the Swedish Elite League, right?
Yeah.
So, that's a league that's not just populated with, a bunch of 16, 17, 18-year-olds, right? There's a lot of, there's talent in that league, bigger bodies, that sort of thing to play against. So, it's not surprising that, the Jets kind of look to those types of places sometimes, just different types of development and that sort of thing. So, people are going to look at this and say, they didn't get a lot of picks. Maybe they didn't get the best players on the board at some points. I'd argue that Cole Perfetti was the best player at 10 and might have been the best player a lot earlier on in that top 10, but he just got passed for, that's just the way the draft goes sometimes. So I don't, they had 4 picks. They didn't trade down. They didn't try and obtain more picks. I mean, that could be a criticism, I suppose. But at the end of the day, you're not going to know how this draft turns out until, 5-6 years from now, right? And when these players, I mean, everybody thought Mark Scheifele might have been a flop because they saw Sean Couturier doing a lot better than Scheifele was beforehand, before Scheifele came into his own. And then you realize,
can't decide these things 5 minutes after the draft.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way.
They don't get decided on draft day, right? They don't get decided the next day either. It takes years for this to happen. And so, yeah, it's gonna take the same amount of time. And that's the nature of the draft. That's the way it goes.
For sure. And the Jets, I think, came into this draft with a need of filling spots up front in their prospect pool. Yeah. They had a lot of prospect defensemen already, and I think they did a really good job of that with Cole Perfetti, obviously. And as you mentioned in the 2nd round, getting Daniel Torgersson, who's a big winger. There's some debate as to whether he should have been a 1st rounder or even a 3rd rounder. If you look at some of the pundits out there, there's a wide disparity on where people think he should have been, but the Jets took him right in the middle there in the 2nd round, and I think they like his size a lot. Then they started to go to some defensemen. They only had 2 more picks. They had traded away their picks previously, and they ended up getting a small defenseman in Anton Johansen. I mean, really small. He's 154 pounds, but apparently a great skater and puck mover. And then they went big with a defenseman in Tyrel Bauer from the Seattle Thunderbirds. So, I think overall it's a balanced draft for the Jets. And I think, you might look at it and say it's not perfect, but what is? Yeah. And, when you only have 4 picks to get the balance that they did, they certainly don't need any goalies in their system. I think they did the right things.
Yeah. The size is always a thing. So when you see Anton Johansen, yeah, well, exactly. But, when you see a guy like that with, his size, it's people, because you look at a lot of these teams now and they have a lot of bigger, stronger defensemen, but can also look at teams like the Boston Bruins who have Torrey Krug, who's not, like that guy's not tipping the scales very high, and he's not very tall either. He goes up to about Zdeno Chara's waist in Boston there, but he's a good defenseman, and Jets only have to really look to Toby Enstrom to see a good, small, puck-moving defenseman where, maybe this Anton Johansen can maybe eventually turn into that role. You never know, right? But, like, size, guys fill out later. Some guys, have a growth spurt later. Well, yeah. Well, and you look at Quinton Byfield plays with a short stick, right? I mean, it's weird. But again, size, all that stuff, we'll see. I mean, you never know. I mean, Tyrel Bauer could be, who knows, the next Dustin Byfuglien. You just never know, right? Because you don't know what these kids are going to turn out to be until they start playing pro hockey, until a bunch of different things, right? So it is.
Well, you're right, because Byfuglien was a late draft pick himself,
right? And so was Toby Enstrom, I believe, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So
he was indeed. So there's been a lot of that over the years, a lot of different kinds of things that happen. And, when you watch the NHL Network today, and they listed lots of interesting players that were picked in the 5th round, in the 6th round.
Yeah.
Connor Hellebuck and Jamie Benn being among the 5th rounders, and Mark Stone, the Winnipegger, who's turned out so good, was a 6th rounder. So these things do happen, there's no doubt. But just to segue a little bit here, the really big news of the day today was the Jets signing of Dylan DeMelo, a very serviceable defenseman who seems to want to be here. And when he had choices as a free agent, I think that has to be a real coup for the organization to be able to get him. I'm not sure he's the perfect right D that they needed, but he certainly can get part of the job done.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of part of it, right? I mean, he might not be the prototypical guy, because everybody wants Dustin Byfuglien with Josh Morrissey, right? They want that kind of big, powering, lumbering defenseman, great on the power play, just an all-around great defenseman. But you also could have Josh Morrissey and Dylan DeMelo be this, very good shutdown pair in the NHL. And if your top pairing is your best shutdown pair, and that's what they do, are you really upset? I mean, the Jets have a ton of scoring talent up front, and they are going to, likely, because given that they signed Demello now, they're not going to be, running after Alex Bertrandro. Not that they ever were, but big name defenseman now. The cap space it's running out. They have 11 million. We don't know what's going to happen with Brian Little yet, so you have to assume they only have 11 million right now. Obviously, still want to get a second line center. Don't know what they're doing with Patrick Laine just yet. There's a lot of still unknowns as free agency lingers here, starting on Friday. But yeah, DeMelo he brings. If you watch Dylan DeMelo, and I understand, a lot of people, we didn't all have a lot of time. He came. I think he was traded February 18th. The NHL was shut down less than a month later. But Josh Morrissey's game got better, and I think part of that was because Josh Morrissey didn't have to try and shoulder a huge load anymore, whoever he was paired with. Josh Morrissey could just play defense, but also show a bit of his offensive upside. And there is that in Josh Morrissey. We saw it throughout his junior career. I understand it's junior, but Josh Morrissey has a knack for being an offensive player, but he's often been asked to be a stay-at-home defenseman at times, and that's what he does. But I think DeMelo, it's just a good, it's a good signing, a value signing. He's very good in the analytics. He plays the PK. So, there's a lot of things that Dylan DeMelo can do. And yeah, I don't, there's nothing wrong with it. It's
good value for sure. Good value. I think you could argue that none of the Jets defense corps was very good in the playoffs. They got beaten up by the Calgary Flames. And, I think that's going to be a concern for Jets fans if this is where things land. That DeMelo is the big signing, and they continue to go with what they've had, and they bring in a couple of guys. Maybe the rookies, Heinola and Sandberg, get a look on the left side. Maybe some other people they come in through free agency get a look on the left side. Maybe they re-sign Nathan Beaulieu. I'm not sure that people are going to be all that confident in a top 6 like that. So I will be interested to see what happens on Friday. We'll come back to that in another video. But for sure, the Jets haven't made their move. They haven't traded Patrick Laine. They haven't made any big move here yet. I think they take a look and see what's available there in free agency on Friday. And then they got lots of time. The season's not starting until January.
Yeah, tons of time. There's a lot more players now to look at because all the qualifying offers finally came in. And there's some notable names that didn't get qualified this year. And that doesn't mean they won't re-sign with the teams that didn't qualify them. It's a strange year. that can happen. But the Jets, they do have options, especially on defense. Now, there's not a lot of superstar defensemen out there for them to get, but there are some good depth picks, and I'll have a story tomorrow on who the Jets can potentially target there. And one of the guys I think, and maybe a TJ Brody. Obviously, Travis Hamonek's name is out there. Just because of being from St. Malo, it's not far from Winnipeg, of course. But there's other guys out there. Same with forwards. I mean, there's going to be, and again, you'll have to see what happens with Patrick Laine. Does he get traded? If he does, that haul is going to be quite large as well. They didn't trade him at the draft. The Jets didn't get an extra first-round draft pick, so it'll be interesting to see if they do trade him. It's going to be you would have to think it's got to be an elite player for an elite player at this point, because you didn't get that draft pick. So, and then the possibility of offer sheets. Who knows? I mean, it's 2020. It's a weird year, and it could all kind of kick off this year. So lots to look forward to on Friday, and it's only a couple days away, and the draft. Well, as we're doing this, still hasn't really ended. I think they're still in the 7th round. So, it's coming hard and fast, but that's kind of just the way that this year has been and how it's kind of shaped up with this return to play and everything that's followed.
All right. Well, we will be back with some talk about the free agency later this week. Obviously, it's been an interesting week so far, and we expect more news from the Winnipeg Jets. I'm Ted Wyman for Scott Billeck for the Winnipeg Sun.